For millions of Americans in the 1970s, Sunday nights meant one thing: sitting down to watch a loud, stubborn man argue with his liberal son-in-law in a small Queens living room. The show was All in the Family, and the arguments between Archie Bunker and Michael "Meathead" Stivic felt so real that audiences sometimes forgot they were watching actors. The tension felt authentic. The insults sounded personal. The political clashes were sharp and uncomfortable. But what many viewers did not realize was that some of that tension did not disappear when the cameras stopped rolling. Behind the scenes, there was genuine friction between the two men at the center of it all: Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner. Carroll O'Connor was not new to struggle by the time he became famous. Born in the Bronx in 1924, he grew up during the Great Depression in an Irish-American working-class family. Money was tight. Life required discipline. From an early age, he understood how hard people had to work just to survive. Those early experiences shaped his worldview. They gave him a deep understanding of class differences, pride, and frustration. Years later, when he stepped into the shoes of Archie Bunker, he was not inventing that mindset from thin air. He had seen it. He had lived around it. Before acting became his career, O'Connor pursued education seriously. He attended college, studied literature, and developed a love for language and storytelling. During World War II, he served in the Merchant Marine. That experience exposed him to different people and different ways of thinking. It also strengthened his discipline and resilience. After the war, he continued studying and eventually turned to acting. But unlike many young performers chasing fame, O'Connor approached acting as a craft. He believed it required thought, preparation, and respect. He took small roles in theater, television, and film. He struggled for steady work. Success did not come quickly. By the time he finally landed the role that would define his life, he was already in his mid-40s. That long road mattered. It meant he did not take his breakthrough for granted. In 1971, television changed forever when All in the Family premiered. The show was bold. It tackled racism, sexism, politics, and the cultural divide in America. At the center was Archie Bunker, a working-class man with strong opinions and little patience. Archie said things that shocked audiences. He expressed prejudice openly. He argued loudly. Yet Carroll O'Connor refused to play him as a villain. Instead, he showed Archie's fear of change, his confusion about a shifting world, and his love for his family beneath the anger. That balance made the character complex rather than cruel. The show became a cultural phenomenon. It dominated ratings. It won awards. It sparked debates across the country. Living rooms turned into discussion spaces about race, politics, and generational conflict. Archie Bunker became one of the most famous characters in television history. Opposite Archie stood Michael Stivic, played by Rob Reiner. Michael represented a younger generation, college-educated, politically progressive, outspoken. On screen, he challenged Archie constantly. Their debates became the heartbeat of the show. Week after week, audiences watched father-in-law and son-in-law clash over everything from war to women's rights. It was comedy, but it was also social commentary. However, the line between fiction and reality sometimes blurred. Rob Reiner was much younger than O'Connor when the show began. He came from a Hollywood background. His father was comedian and director Carl Reiner. Rob had grown up around show business. He was confident and comfortable in front of the camera. He also held strong political views, much like his character. For him, the arguments on the show were not just jokes. They reflected real beliefs. Carroll O'Connor, though personally more liberal than Archie Bunker, approached the role differently. For him, the show was about storytelling and character depth. He focused on rhythm, timing, and emotional truth. He wanted Archie to feel human, not like a simple symbol of ignorance. According to O'Connor, he sometimes felt that Reiner treated their scenes like real political debates instead of performances that required subtlety. Over time, tension built between them. O'Connor later admitted in interviews that he disliked Reiner intensely. He felt that Reiner acted superior and carried himself with a sense of moral authority. Whether that perception was fully accurate is open to debate, but what matters is that O'Connor believed it. He felt challenged, not just as an actor, but as a person. For a man who had struggled for decades to earn respect in his profession, that feeling cut deep. On a television set, small tensions can grow quickly. Filming a weekly series is demanding. Long hours, repeated takes, and constant pressure can magnify personality differences. O'Connor was known for being serious and sometimes stubborn. Reiner was outspoken and energetic. Both men were strong-willed. Neither liked backing down. When creative disagreements happened, they did not always remain calm discussions. And yet, something remarkable happened. The tension that made working together difficult also made their scenes electric. When Archie shouted at Michael, and Michael fired back with sarcasm, there was an edge that could not be faked. The frustration felt genuine. The audience sensed that energy. Ironically, the friction may have strengthened the show's realism. Despite his anger toward Reiner, O'Connor remained professional. The show continued successfully for years. He won multiple Emmy Awards for his performance. He carried the character of Archie Bunker into the spin-off series Archie Bunker's Place after the original show ended. His dedication to his craft never wavered. Away from the cameras, O'Connor's life was filled with deep love and deep pain. He and his wife adopted a son named Hugh. O'Connor adored him. When he later starred in the Heat of the Night, he created a role for Hugh on the show. It was a way to share his world with his son. Family meant everything to him. Tragically, Hugh struggled with addiction. In 1995, he died after a long battle with drugs. The loss devastated O'Connor. For a man who had played a powerful father on television, real life brought unbearable grief. He could have withdrawn from the public eye. Instead, he chose to speak openly about addiction. He appeared in public service announcements. He warned other families about the dangers of drugs. He used his fame to raise awareness. It showed another side of him, compassionate, vulnerable, and determined. Looking at O'Connor's life as a whole, it becomes clear that he felt everything intensely. He loved deeply. He grieved deeply. And when he disliked someone, that feeling was just as strong. His hatred toward Reiner was not casual irritation. It came from pride, from personality clash, and from two men who saw the world differently. Rob Reiner eventually moved on from acting and became a successful director, creating several well-known films. His career flourished in a new direction. O'Connor continued acting and producing. Time passed. The sharp edges of the 1970s cultural battles softened. But the story of their conflict remained part of television history. Carol O'Connor died in 2001 after suffering a heart attack related to long-term health issues. He was 76 years old. He left behind a legacy that went far beyond one character. He had helped television grow up. He had forced audiences to confront uncomfortable truths. And through it all, he had remained fiercely committed to his craft. The story of O'Connor and Reiner is not simply about hatred. It is about generational conflict. It is about ego and pride. It is about how art can reflect real tensions in society. In the 1970s, America was divided politically and culturally. The arguments on All in the Family mirrored that divide. In some ways, O'Connor and Reiner were living that conflict in real time. And perhaps that is why the show still feels powerful decades later. The emotions were not manufactured. They were rooted in genuine differences. Two men, two generations, two strong personalities, forced to work together week after week. In the end, audiences saw unforgettable television. What they did not always see was the personal cost behind it. Sometimes great art is born from harmony, but other times it comes from friction, sharp, uncomfortable, and very human. Carroll O'Connor and Rob Reiner gave the world one of television's most famous rivalries. And whether they liked each other or not, their conflict helped create something that would be remembered for generations. That is the complicated truth behind the laughter. As the years passed, the success of All in the Family only grew. The show was not just popular, it became a mirror of American life. Families gathered every week to watch arguments that felt close to home. Some viewers agreed with Archie, others sided with Michael. Many saw pieces of their own families in the bunker living room. That kind of cultural impact is rare, and it placed enormous pressure on the actors at the center of it all. For Carroll O'Connor, the pressure was personal. He knew that Archie Bunker could easily be misunderstood. Some viewers thought the show supported Archie's opinions instead of challenging them. O'Connor often spoke publicly to explain that Archie was meant to reveal ignorance, not celebrate it. That responsibility weighed on him. He felt protective of the character and of the message behind the show. Rob Reiner, meanwhile, became a voice for the younger generation. His character, Michael Stivic, stood for change. He challenged racism. He questioned authority. He argued for equality. For many young viewers, Michael was the hero. But that dynamic could also create tension. When audiences loudly cheer one side of a debate, it can influence how actors feel about their roles and about each other. Behind the scenes, stories suggest that disagreements between O'Connor and Reiner were not always explosive shouting matches. Instead, they were often quieter, but deeply felt. Small comments, different approaches to rehearsals, disagreements about how certain lines should be delivered. These may seem minor, but over time, they add up. Especially when two strong personalities are involved. O'Connor believed deeply in preparation. He valued structure and discipline. He wanted scenes to flow in a certain rhythm. Comedy especially depends on timing. A pause too long or too short can change everything. If he felt that rhythm was being disrupted, he took it seriously. Reiner, being younger and more spontaneous, sometimes approached scenes differently. That difference in style could create frustration. It is also important to remember the larger cultural climate of the 1970s. America was divided over war, civil rights, and political leadership. Television was changing rapidly. Shows were beginning to challenge viewers instead of simply entertaining them. All in the Family was at the center of that change. The debates between Archie and Michael were not just comedy. They reflected real arguments happening across the country. In that environment, emotions ran high. For O'Connor, who had lived through the Great Depression and World War II, some of the social changes felt sudden and overwhelming. Even though he personally held progressive views, he understood the fear that older Americans felt. He brought that understanding into Archie. Reiner, representing a younger and more idealistic generation, carried his own passion. When those two energies met, sparks were almost unavoidable. Yet despite everything, the show continued to succeed. That success required cooperation. No matter how tense things became, both men showed up to work. They performed. They delivered lines that millions would quote for years. Professionalism kept the machine running. After the original series ended in 1979, O'Connor carried Archie into Archie Bunker's place. The spin-off shifted the focus slightly, but kept the familiar presence of Archie at its center. By this time, much of the earlier tension had cooled, simply because circumstances had changed. Cast members moved on to new projects. Life moved forward. Rob Reiner's career took a dramatic turn. He stepped behind the camera and became a director. Over time, he created films that gained both critical and commercial success. His reputation grew beyond his role as Michael Stivic. He proved himself in a new creative field. That transition may have also reshaped how people viewed the earlier conflict. Sometimes, distance softens even the sharpest disagreements. For O'Connor, the late 1980s brought another major success within the heat of the night. This role showed a different side of him. Instead of the loud and stubborn Archie, he played Chief Bill Gillespie, a more thoughtful and measured character. The show dealt with crime and racial tension in the American South. Once again, O'Connor found himself in a series that explored serious social issues. And once again, he approached it with care.
This second major success proved something important. O'Connor was not just Archie Bunker. He was a versatile actor capable of range and depth. He was also involved behind the scenes as a producer, showing that he understood storytelling beyond his own performance. That broader involvement reflected his lifelong respect for the craft. Still, personal tragedy would mark the later years of his life more deeply than any professional conflict ever could. The loss of his son Hugh, in 1995, changed him permanently. Grief reshapes priorities. Arguments that once felt intense can seem smaller in the face of such loss. O'Connor became more outspoken about addiction and the need for compassion. He channeled his pain into purpose. When he spoke about his son, his voice often carried both strength and heartbreak. It revealed a man far more complex than the angry character many viewers associated with him. That complexity is essential when considering his feelings toward Rob Reiner. Human emotions are rarely simple. Dislike can coexist with respect. Anger can exist alongside professional admiration. In fact, some observers have suggested that while O'Connor strongly disliked aspects of Reiner's personality, he still recognized his talent. After all, the scenes they created together remain some of the most memorable in television history. That level of impact does not happen without skill on both sides. As time went on, the sharp words O'Connor once used to describe his feelings became part of entertainment lore. Interviews repeated the quote about hatred. Headlines emphasized the feud. But like many stories in Hollywood, the truth likely contains shades of gray. Tension, yes. Strong feelings, certainly. But also years of collaboration that produced groundbreaking work. When Carol O'Connor passed away in 2001, tributes poured in. Colleagues praised his dedication. Critics celebrated his influence on television. Audiences remembered the laughter and the uncomfortable truths he had brought into their homes. The focus returned to his achievements rather than his conflicts. Looking back now, the story of O'Connor and Reiner feels like a snapshot of a particular moment in American culture. It represents a time when television dared to confront division directly. It shows how art can mirror society's disagreements. And it reminds us that behind every iconic scene are real people with real emotions. The arguments between Archie and Michael may have been scripted, but the passion behind them was not entirely artificial. Two men, shaped by different generations and experiences, stood across from each other and delivered performances that changed television forever. In the end, what remains is not simply the memory of conflict. What remains is the impact of the work. All in the Family continues to be studied and discussed decades later. New generations discover it and are surprised by how relevant it still feels. That lasting relevance is the true legacy. Conflict may have existed, strong words may have been spoken, but from that tension came something powerful, a show that dared to speak honestly about division and change. And perhaps that is the deeper lesson in this story. Sometimes creative friction, though uncomfortable, can lead to art that endures. Carol O'Connor and Rob Reiner may not have shared warmth behind the scenes, but together they created one of the most unforgettable rivalries in television history.